Hello, everybody. Welcome to the webinar. We've got people rolling in. Oh, we got lots of participants. That's exciting. Welcome, welcome. I'm going to do a quick icebreaker. You guys can drop your answers in the chat. Make sure when you send your message, it says to everyone and not just to hosts and panelists, so you can interact with all the other attendees. But my question for you guys, since we're kind of moving into the winter season, is what's on your rental checklist for getting all your rentals ready for the winter time? I'm excited to hear everyone's answers. Feel free to drop them in that chat. And feel free to drop where you're calling in from too, so we have a little context. Because if you're in Texas or California, you might not have anything on that winter checklist. Upgrading flooring, says Tracy. Harrison said, trying to survive hurricane season in Florida. Happy tenants. Gutter cleaning and leaf removal. That's a good one. Lots of leaves falling here in Colorado. All right. I'm going to go ahead and get started with our housekeeping items just so we can preserve everyone's time. We wanted to give a quick hello. I'm Ava. I'm your host for today and really excited for this webinar and all these awesome speakers we have queued up and to talk about some landlord lessons and mistakes that can really cost you as a rental property owner. Feel free to keep interacting in the chat too. Housekeeping things, Zoom. If you don't hear audio right now, make sure you have the right speaker so you can hear us and hear all these good insights. And make sure you have your view that you want. You can do speaker or gallery depending on who you want to see speaking. Again, make sure your chat is going to everyone instead of just hosts and panelists. So you can interact during the presentation. And then we will be doing Q&A at the end. So no questions while our speakers are answering the questions, but we will save time at the end. So feel free to submit those questions in the Q&A box. You'll see it at the bottom of your Zoom bar. We will get to all of those. Don't you worry. But yeah, please submit those throughout the presentation. And we are recording. You will get this recording afterwards, as well as some awesome free downloadables. So everyone will be getting that. And just a disclaimer, this content is for educational purposes and does not constitute legal advice. Cool, let's get into the agenda. So we're going to go through and ask our speakers some of the hard questions to hear about their experience as landlords. And then, of course, live Q&A with all of you guys. Really curious to hear what questions you have for our speakers. And then we'll be giving out some contact information if you want to follow up with speakers. And then, of course, you'll be receiving those resources after the webinar. Cool. So we're going to go through some speaker introductions. Harrison, you want to give a little introduction?
Sure. My name is Harrison. I'm the Vice President of Marketing at TurboTenant, and I've been a landlord for 14 years now. And TurboTenant builds software that allows you to manage rental properties yourself. You don't have to go and hire a property management company. We find tenants for you. We write lease agreements. We collect rent automatically and just kind of streamline the whole process for you for the entire landlord journey. And my properties have been in Florida, where I'm from, but I now live in Denver, Colorado.
Awesome. Thanks, Harrison. Rick.
Hello, everyone. My name is Rick Albert. I am a Los Angeles-based real estate broker associate, so a realtor here, but I also own investment properties between four different states. I do have one here in LA, but I also own in Nashville, Birmingham, and St. Louis. And I also have a podcast called The Key to the City of Angels, where we talk all things real estate with kind of a focus on LA, but can apply to a lot of people.
Awesome. Last but certainly not least, Zach.
Hello, everyone. So as it says, I'm a co-founder of Front Lobby. I'm also a former lawyer, which was part of what got me into this, and I'm a landlord in Canada. And Front Lobby enables you to prevent delinquencies and reward renters with improved credit.
Awesome. Cool. Well, before we get into insights from all of these awesome speakers from awesome backgrounds, we're going to ask you a quick question just to get a gauge on our audience, see what you guys are thinking, and hear about if you've ever made a mistake as a landlord that ended up costing you a lot of money. So feel free to answer that poll and we will reveal the results later. Give everyone a second to answer. Cool. Excited to see what everyone says. All right, getting into our first question, obviously related to the topic of this webinar. We've all been there, whether you are working on your first deal or you have 50 deals and are really scaling your portfolio. Mistakes happen, and whether it's from like an eviction, or maybe you have a frogger living in one of your rentals, or maybe you didn't properly screen a tenant. We've all had things happen as landlords. And maybe we had that false confidence that these situations weren't going to happen to us and that everything was going to be smooth sailing. So we're going to get into it with our speakers. And we're going to start with Rick, since you've been in LA, specifically an area with a lot of regulation for landlords. I'm curious, what's one time you thought you had everything under control and it turned out to be a costly lesson?
Yeah, so there was a couple, one for here in LA and one for out of state. And funny, they're both actually related to construction. So one of the things that we never think about is delays. So when I was buying my second kind of like rental property, one of the things that causes a lot of delays in construction is actually just making decisions. And so we were waiting on which doors to pick. We took too long. And then once we ordered it, it actually was delayed, took 10 weeks. And the city wouldn't let us touch the property until those doors were installed. So just the carrying costs alone, probably about $10,000 plus any other delays because we had to push out other vendors, things like that. The second one was when a business partner and I were buying out of state, and part of the agreement was the previous owner had to get the property rent ready. And we had money held back, about $10,000. Not only did he not finish it, it ended up costing about $30,000, but the way the contract read was that both parties had to agree to release the $10,000. And the seller never agreed to it.
Of course.
So that was 2022, and to this day, the money's still sitting in escrow. So versus in hindsight, because I we didn't think anything like we read that and we're like, whatever. Why wouldn't they agree to give us the money if they didn't do the work? Not thinking they were going to hold it back. But in hindsight, it should have been, at the buyer's discretion, right?
Yeah.
At the buyer's approval is really what it should have been, or provided, based on provided invoices, that sort of deal.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really good one, is making sure contracts are airtight and you're
Yeah.
protected as much as possible, especially in partnership agreements. And I know that's very
Hmm.
common within the rental space as
Yeah,
well.
for sure.
Cool. Thank you for sharing. Zach, since you, part of what led you to Front Lobby was an experience early on as a landlord. I'm curious to hear what happened that made you realize the industry needed some change, and inspired you to create the company.
Yeah, thanks for asking, Ava. It was two things. So the first is, as a young renter myself, I actually asked my property manager if they could report my rent to the credit bureaus to build my credit. And at that time, the option did not exist. But for landlords, it's hard to screen without credit data, and so good renters can look risky on paper. Um, what I wanted is for a way to show, the history of prioritizing rent payments and also enable them to build credit. But the other thing that happened to me was that I inherited a number of tenants when purchasing a property with months of unpaid rent and could not evict them due to very friendly tenant laws. So we ended up with major losses, a bunch of property damage, and really no recourse to recover that debt. Now, I wasn't alone. I'm still not alone. The stat is something like 65% of landlords will experience unpaid rent. So it's out there and important to be dealing with. But for the small landlord experiencing months of delinquency, it can put them out of business pretty quickly. And individual landlords own over half of all rental properties in the US. So I realized that there were no tools to protect us landlords or reward responsible renters. And while researching solutions, I came in contact with a retired fraud expert and also a housing provider who was developing a similar idea. So we decided to build a system that gave responsible renters a way to be seen and landlords tools that could reduce the risk. So Front Lobby grew out of that, and today our members who use rent reporting have shared up to a 92% drop in delinquencies. And personally, I'm also a user. I've collected nearly $200,000 in delinquent back rents from using it.
Awesome. Cool. Thank you for sharing. Evictions are very tricky. And if anyone's been through one, a huge, huge headache and just can be a huge loss of profits as well. But I also love how you brought up that sometimes what you get from traditional screening reports isn't the full picture, and there's always a full story behind screening reports to look into. Yeah, thank you so much. Harrison, TurboTenant, works with over 850,000 landlords. I'm curious to hear from talking to landlords at events or maybe just some users. What is one of the most common mistakes that you hear about?
Yeah, I mean, it kind of goes into the same realm as what Zach and Rick talked about of just poor paperwork, or just costly mistakes in paperwork. And my example for me personally was, I found a lease online, rewrote it myself, and I'm not an attorney. Um, and there's a line in there where I was trying to sell the property and I had to give 120 days notice to be able to show it. And I assumed that it was like 30 or 60. And then when it was time, I was not allowed to show the property to sell. And I found a way to work out a deal with the renter, but it was just a huge headache. And the property was shown much less than it should have been. And it took an extra 2 months to sell. Values were dropping in my area. And I probably lost $20,000 on the sale because it just took too long. Um, so I hear that a lot too of, I'm using some lease I found online. I actually tested recently trying to create a lease on ChatGPT, and it's 2 pages long in Colorado, and it should be a lot more than that. Um, I think those are the mistakes that you don't know what isn't in there. Zach comes from a legal background. Like, there's a lot of little details that come in these agreements that can really burn you when it doesn't work out. And I've gotten lucky with my terribly written lease, and now I use turbo tenants, fortunately, but where I just had good tenants and I screened them well. And that was something I got lucky with. But I do hear a lot of stories that end up falling down this path where you set yourself up for risk by having a poorly written lease or a poorly written agreement in some way. So that's something that these days I think you can avoid if you just start out on the right foot.
Totally. Yeah. Paperwork is huge and it is complex as a landlord, right? Every single jurisdiction has completely different regulations and requirements. I mean, in some states, Harrison, they do have 30-day notice versus what you experience, 120-day notice. So yeah, all great insights. Thank you guys for sharing. So it looks like it's time to reveal our poll results. It looks like 73% answered yes. No surprise there. We've all had one mistake, whether it's something super small or something super big. I am surprised that 32 people answered no. So I'm curious to hear what systems you set up before you started to have really awesome systems to not have mistakes. And then too many to count, we had 5%. It happens for sure. But we're going to talk about how to avoid that. Cool. We got poll results. We are moving into our next poll, and it is asking you, has your experience managing and owning rentals matched up to your expectations? And again, we will reveal the results later. Give everyone a second to answer. Lots of interaction in the chat. Thanks, guys, for joining. And just as a reminder for everyone who joined late, is being recorded and will be sent out after the webinar. Cool. We will move into asking our speakers this question, which is, how did managing rental properties not match up to your expectations? And we're going to start with Rick. You manage your own investments. How do you balance the business side along with everything else that goes in just your day to day?
Yeah, so some I manage ourselves, some we actually use property management, which has been kind of interesting because then I can kind of call BS on a property manager if they do something they shouldn't be doing. In terms of balancing, there's a couple things. I've actually been fortunate, knock on wood, here in Los Angeles. I've had multiple tenants and I've had, for the most part, good luck. And part of that was because one, we tended to do a lot of renovations up front, right? So we didn't have those surprise costs of a leaky faucet or something like that. Um, and then also, as mentioned earlier, we tend to do really solid leases, addendums. One of the things I do like to add, and I have all my clients do it, is like an addendum with a list of rules. Like, just like, hey, here are the quiet hours. Here's laundry uses. Here's trash days. A lot of people don't think about that and they just assume that they're going to be quiet in the middle of the night. It's like, no, there's quiet hours because all my properties are at least more than 2 units, which means you're creating a community. So you have to make sure everybody plays nice. And that has helped tremendously in terms of some of the out-of-state properties. And a mistake I actually made this year is I bought a fourplex out of state, and we realized that the previous property management company didn't enforce everything in the lease. So then when we go to enforce things, the tenants throw a fit, and then you have a battle on your hands because expectations weren't necessarily met. So in hindsight, we do it here in LA. It's really common. It's called a tenant estoppel, where the tenants sign off saying this is how much I'm paying in rent, all that. It's not, I've noticed it hasn't been as common in some of these out-of-state markets, but it's something that we're just going to have to require going forward to really make sure it becomes a little bit more passive because all expectations have been set.
I love that, Rick. At TurboTenant, we call it a welcome home guide to get ahead of those FAQs. And I love
Hmm.
that you can even go like beyond that with like providing local recommendations and like really enforcing that community aspect.
Hmm.
Another thing we say at TurboTenant a lot is the landlord-tenant relationship is essentially a business relationship. It's customer service. And when you're
100%.
providing these resources for them, it helps your life, but it also creates a better community and a better experience for everyone living in your rentals, which is better for keeping away or not having long periods of vacancy if you can get tenants to stay because they like being in your property.
Yeah,
Hmm.
I love that you use the word community. You're building communities in your area, and like I think when you're thinking like that, as Ava said, like you're creating a totally different relationship with your customers.
Right. Yeah.
Absolutely. Harrison, thank you for jumping in. And then I also have a question for you.
Okay.
Um, when you started renting out your own property, you said it wasn't nearly as hands-off as you expected. What was the moment you realized it wasn't truly passive income, even though the IRS might say rentals are passive income? And how has that shaped the way that you use technology today?
Yeah, I mean, I've been a renter in plenty of places, and I pay my rent on time. I'm like, I just do it automatically. It's the second I know it's due. Any bill I get, I pay instantly. I learned that no one else is like that. So, that was something, and for me, like, oh, I'll take payment whatever is convenient, ideally digital, and so I end up using Zelle or Venmo for some of the places in the past, and then I'd get these partial payments, and because I am someone that pays everything instantly, I, so I can not think about it afterwards. It's done, box is checked. Now I have these, 75% payments, and now I'm checking my bank account or my Zelle or my Venmo, like, did the other one come in? And I'm just creating stress. And that was something that only became an actual headache because the rest of it is just me being neurotic. The headache part was when my payments were due for the mortgage and I didn't have enough to cover, and now I'm taking money out of my other bank account to pay for it. And then I'm doing all this accounting work to make sure that I'm paying it back and tracking it. It only happened once, thankfully, and Tenant just forgot. I messaged them and the payment comes 15 minutes later. I stopped doing that. That's one of the things I love about TurboTenant is everything is automated and there's no partial payments for my accounts. And I don't have to deal with that headache anymore. And then I don't have to be the bad guy if they're late. It's just the automatic late fees get applied. Because even when that person was late, I just felt they're nice people. I want to treat them well. I don't want to charge them that $100 that's in the late fee in the lease. Because it became real personal for me. Like I know them, I know their kids' names. It's kind of what I wanted. Then I've learned the more I could separate myself, the better for everybody. And that's what I love about using software for automating rent payments is and automating leases and communications. It's TurboTenant's the bad guy. They're the one that have to charge that late fee. So that is something that I learned that takes the monthly check-in. I know the payment's coming in, or else I'm getting late fees to cover, and I don't get late payments anymore thanks to using the right software.
Thank you, Harrison. That's huge. Definitely taking the personal aspect out of those awkward conversations like lease agreements, rent collection, late fees. I did want to call two things out real quick. One based on something someone submitted in the chat, and that was always make sure, be careful with the community rules and make sure you're following Fair Housing Act. I wanted to call that out because, yes, so true. Definitely make sure you're following the Fair Housing Act when creating community rules. And additionally, when you are setting any late fees or anything else for rent collection, always keep Fair Housing Act in mind and check your local regulations. Just since it was based on both of the things that you guys said, Rick and Harrison. One more thing, I did notice that there's a lot of questions being submitted in the chat, which is great. Thank you so much for the questions. But if everyone could submit them in the Q&A box, if you don't see it, it's that little like Q&A question mark box at the bottom of your Zoom bar. If everyone could submit there, then we can promptly get to your questions at the end when we do Q&A, and we can have them all in order so we can make sure to address those. But thank you so much for dropping those in. I already see some great questions. Cool. We're going to move on to Zach. When you think about cash flow and risk management, how does rent reporting help landlords treat their rentals like a true business instead of a side hustle?
Yeah, it's a good question. Well, I mean, most small landlords start out managing by instinct, not systems. And that was definitely how I started too, along with, all the mistakes that come with that. But the truth is when your rent stops coming in, everything becomes very hands-on. And so by using rent reporting, it helps create a steady and predictable cash flow. Tenants are, of course, more consistent with their payments and because it's impacting their credit scores. And so it builds that accountability without the conflict or chasing payments, like Harrison mentioned through TurboTenant. And it turns rent collection into a repeatable system that then protects your revenue. It also gives landlords, clear data on who's paying on time and who is at risk, which of course makes it easier to plan and to budget and reinvest. And additionally, it removes emotion from the rent collection process and it adds the structure to the business of being a landlord. Even if you only have one unit, you can now avoid some of those headaches.
That's great. Again, taking that personal aspect out, it's really nice to have that barrier in between you and the tenant. As I said, it is a
Yeah.
business relationship, and it can be hard to uphold that when you're in a really personal relationship and texting them, allowing them to maybe call you in the middle of the night if there's an issue. You definitely want to avoid that. Awesome. Thank you guys so much for those responses. We're going to get to our poll results if we could pop those up. All right, expectation versus reality. Has your experience managing and owning rentals match your expectations? It looks like we have some spread out answers here. About 30% said more work and harder than expected, which is what I was expecting everyone to answer. Because I know a lot of the time we're thinking passive income rentals are going to be this passive way to make some cash flow. But we did see a lot of people respond about what I expected. That's awesome. You went in with some realistic expectations. Some answered less work or easier than expected. That's interesting. And then some still figuring out the process. That's definitely super realistic, especially if you're just getting started. And I did notice we have a lot of first-time landlords join this webinar. So welcome, and I hope this is helpful information for you. Awesome. We are going to segue into our next topic. What systems are you relying on to keep you organized and secure in your day-to-day operations? So I'm going to give everyone a chance to respond again. Curious to hear what your operations currently look like. If you're someone who's got a spreadsheet going, someone who's kind of just winging it, or if you have a really, really systemized approach to landlording. I know it's probably going to be all across the board. Awesome. Cool. Now that we gave everyone a chance to respond, we're going to get into our speaker response responses and really talk about the real cost of trusting without systems, which we've kind of been foreshadowing this whole webinar already, talking about, maybe agreements not being airtight or the personal aspect of the landlord-tenant relationship and what that can result in, like community problems or lack of retention among your rentals. So we've already talked about some of those costs, but we're going to dive even more into it with this final question. And I'm going to start with Rick. As someone who's managed a lot of deals, what's one process you wish you had in place earlier? If you have multiple processes, I'm curious to hear. And if they have AI, that would be even more interesting.
Well, now you just add an extra layer. So I'm actually working on the AI stuff. To be fair, I'm working on that
Awesome.
one on the background. Just so one of the things that AI is all about like garbage in, garbage out though. So you have to be very clear as to what you want. So what I started doing was going in and asking AI to ask me questions. So say, hey, look, I'm a beginner investor. I have this. Ask me questions to better hone in the system. So that is something that I'm working on in the background. Um, in terms of what I've been doing lately is I do have a checklist. A lot of this happens at the very beginning. So, as almost any attorney, Zach could probably confirm this, it's expensive to be right. So you might be in the right and you might want to go after the previous owner if something was done wrong, but it might cost more than the actual damages. So you're better off just doing your homework up front. So like a very common one is I've seen agents when they list their properties misrepresent how many meters are at the property, right? In terms of water, in terms of whatever. And the answer is always like, well, it's buyer due diligence. So it's like, okay, then we need checklists on the back end of everything to look for. When we buy out a state, because we're not there, we say, okay, we ask our realtor who's out there, take videos, photos, take a video of the street. Um, I do, I mean, pros and cons to self-management. One pro to actually having a property manager is you can ask them, hey, would you manage this property? And oftentimes they'll be like, yeah, no problem, or no, because of X, Y, and Z. And that's a good litmus test of whether or not you should invest there. Because every neighborhood's different. But yeah, in terms of some of the systems, a lot of it happens at the very beginning. So reviewing leases, if you're inheriting tenants, are the leases solid? Are they not solid? Rent rolls, and asking as many questions as you can that tends to be helpful. The one other thing is it can be difficult to keep up. Yeah, I would imagine most people on this call are doing this part-time. So you are gonna have to time block a little bit. So is it making calls first thing in the morning because that's when everyone hasn't started their day yet? Or for me, between me and my business partner on some of the properties we share, it's like, okay, once a month I go in to update our accounting of everything I paid, took care of. that sort of deal. So those are some of the systems I do. And then of course with the vetting, it's we have a long checklist of vetting. What paperwork we look at, what do we look at for credit scores, things like that.
Love that. That's great. Yeah, from what one of our partners once told us, they talked about like being the CEO of your portfolio. And now I love always saying that because it's like you need to create these systems so you can be the CEO. And then, like, if you need an assistant, you can hand off these operations to them. Or say you're going on vacation, you can hand off this information to someone that you trust. Or, for example, keeping that folder of all of those resources that your agent on the ground is sending you, and just having everything at hand so you can reference it easily. Be that CEO for your own portfolio. Love that. Thank
The
you.
other thing that you bring it up, I'm actually working on it on the real estate agent side. Notebook LM is Google's AI.
Yeah,
So what we're doing is we're putting all of our SOPs in there, standard operating procedures, because then you can do as a Q&A. Hey, how do I do this? And it'll pull information from those SOPs. So
I
to your
love
point, it's all about transferring over.
I love that. That's awesome. And I'm glad you mentioned SOPs. If you guys don't have SOPs and you're self-managing a large portfolio, I definitely recommend it. It's something that will change your life, especially if you start onboarding a team. Yeah, and that's a great way to use SOPs as well as upload them into any AI tool.
Hmm.
Awesome. Those are great. Thank you. Cool. Zach. Um, Whoa. For anyone dealing with unpaid rent, what's your advice before it becomes a long-term issue? This is a really good one. Excited to hear your answer.
Yeah, well, I mean, collecting rent is, of course, a very critical part of being a landlord. You can't really operate your business without it. But since I had this question in advance, I put together a 10-part list. So here we go. The number one is act early. So what I mean by that is don't wait and hope that it fixes itself. Don't ignore the fact that you didn't get your rent in the first day or two when it was due. The longer you delay, the harder it's going to become to recover the rent and to create a workable solution with that individual. So number two is communicate right away. Reach out the moment rent is missed, but stay calm, stay calm, professional, and then be curious. Find out what's going on for them. So that translates to number three is gathering the context. If a tenant has a strong history, look for a solution with them first. Sometimes it's a short-term problem, it's not intentional, and it doesn't need to become a pattern if you get on it right away. Number four is move everything to writing. Every attorney will say that. Summarize the conversation by email or text message. The verbal promises fade and people forget what they said or disagree what they said. So written records protect everyone. Number five is offer some structure, but not leniency. And what I mean by that is use a clear payment plan with dates and amounts and be fair, but firm about those deadlines so that they don't start slipping again. Number six is document everything, meaning track the payment dates, track your notices, and track your communications. This creates that full record. And if you ever need to take legal or credit action, you'll have your documentation in place. Number seven is remember to keep emotion out of the situation. Treat it like a business problem. It's not a personal one. And by doing so, that consistency, you'll earn respect with your customer, as you said, Ava, and you'll resolve many of the delinquencies before they become a real problem. Number eight, follow a standard process. So what I mean by that is have an internal checklist for yourself when you're sending the notices, when you're following up, the next steps you're going to take if the payment isn't made. Essentially systems that keep you from hesitating and deciding to, oh, just let it slip for another week or month. Number nine is use the right tools when needed. So if the payment still doesn't come, you need to use the available tools to you. Reporting the debt to the credit bureaus is one that frequently recovers funds professionally and without the time and expense of tribunal or court hearings. And then number 10 is focus on accountability, not punishment. So your goal here is to resolve the issue and to set the expectations for the future. And most
Mhm. Looks like he froze.
Oh,
Dun dun dun.
I know we really left on a cliffhanger there.
Right?
Let's see.
So everyone attend part two of the presentation.
All right, register now. Hopefully we get Zach back here in a
And
second.
I'm sure Zach has this written down that he can share with the whole group. So
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that
exactly.
would be helpful.
Okay, for now, unless we get Zach in a second, I'm going to move on to Harrison. Was there ever a time as a landlord when disorganization or lack of process cost you time or money? And now that you're with TurboTenant, what tools or templates do you recommend?
Yeah, for me, I've been fortunate where aside from the one thing I shared earlier, I haven't had any financial mistakes, but I've had a lot of stress and time mistakes. And for me, it always ends up being maintenance. That's like where I treat them like I'd want to be treated myself, which means I want the problem solved immediately. And Zach came back. Do you want to let him finish his tenth suggestion, and I'll jump
Yeah,
back
we
in?
are all on the edge of our seats.
Yeah, Zach, you're on number 10.
I was on, did I cut off right at the beginning
Yeah,
of number 10?
yeah,
Yeah,
that'd be perfect.
Oh dear. Sorry about that, guys.
no worries.
All right. Number 10 is focusing on accountability, not on punishment. And by that, I'm saying the goal is to resolve the issue and to set expectations for the future. And in my experience, which is I have a lot of experience in this area, most tenants will respond positively when the process is clear and fair. And then you can recover the debt and you can also keep that customer if you want to. All right, that's my top 10 list.
Thank you so much. That was great advice. Good
I have
tips.
I have a question for Zach. So
Yeah.
you have this top 10 list. So if someone's behind on their payments, how do you know you want to go down the path of working with them versus going straight to the eviction process,
I
right?
mean, it really depends upon their history. So I assume, in that example, perhaps it's the first time that they've ever been behind. And so, I'm going to look into the history with them and see, if they've been paying consistently for the past, X number of significant months, and all of a sudden there's a delay, then, I'm going to look at that and say something must have happened. Perhaps they've lost a job. Perhaps they had some other expense come up. Perhaps they forgot. Who knows? And so my first approach is going to be to call them with empathy and say, "Hey, your rent's late. What's going on?" And then, have a conversation about that. Now, certainly if it's somebody who's caused lots of problems and, I'm aware that they've caused damage to the property already, or, they've created a fire hazard in their unit through hoarding or something like that. Perhaps you're going to approach the situation differently. But in any event, from a first step process, reach out, find out what's going on, and then decide how you want to act.
That was a great question. Thank you, Rick.
All
Cool.
right. So back to me, and I'll repeat the question. You can correct me, Ava, just in case I forgot. What of not having systems has caused some financial or time mistakes for me? And how does TurboTenant help with those kind of situations? Is that correct?
Yes.
Sweet. Yeah, I was saying to the group that for me, like when something goes wrong, I want to fix it quickly. Again, I kind of just need to get it checked off. I have two kids under 5. I have a full-time job. My wife works a full-time. Like time is my most valuable resource, and mental time is also pretty important for me. So getting things done quickly and with with maintenance for me, living in Denver, a property in South Florida, um, what's the problem? What is the actual problem of what's broken? Getting all this information, then relaying it over to a third-party vendor, a plumber or a handyman, getting them into the place. There happens to be a gated community in this example, making sure the tenant is there to open the door. It didn't go well the first 2 times in the last example, and the third time I got them in. So like that's a huge headache and it's a huge time suck, and I can't answer phone calls throughout the day easily. And then was it done correctly? All of this documentation that we talk about got real loose for me when it came to maintenance with my property before I had TurboTenant. And then was it actually done correctly? Should I pay them? All of these things came up and became a huge resource drain for me with time. And something that we just released, and we've always had, maintenance requests with TurboTenant where the tenant would fill out all this information, submit it to me It's all in writing and then sign off when it's completed and it looks good. And I still do all the coordination. I'll still have the problem with them not getting in the gate, but moving in the right direction. But what we've built and released recently, going into the world of AI, is having AI capture that maintenance request and start gathering information. Because what tends to happen with most landlord and tenant relationships is my toilet's broken, fix it. Well, what's actually wrong? And our AI will step in to say, okay, what is it leaking? Is it not flushing? Is it what is wrong? Is the toilet seat falling off? And they'll start to get information. Some of that information will then prompt help articles and advice to fix it themselves. If the toilet seat is loose, if you reach under a certain area, you can screw in something, and all of a sudden that toilet seat is secure again. Or open up the tank, look in there, and we're able to solve a lot of problems without even getting the landlord involved. And in other problems, we can't. Now all the questions are now answered. So by the time it gets to me as a landlord, I already have it all ready to go. And now I'm providing a really detailed written document to that plumber. And I can get a much more accurate quote. And that saves hours of back and forth, usually through text, um, because I can't call, of time and my resources. And it saved me money in examples where I'm actually getting the right quote the first time because the plumber comes with the right tools, if we're talking about a toilet in this example. Uh, Still couldn't get them in the door the first time. So that's still something that AI isn't going to solve because they can't unlock the door yet. But maybe in the future we can do that. So that's something that, a system that can help triage issues and solve problems for you instantly is something that we've been working on for a while and we've been really excited about that release.
Love it. Thanks, Harrison.
Mhm.
Maintenance is huge. There can be a lot of back and forth with maintenance. And I got really excited when I heard about that feature and like just the sheer like this problem is happening. Like what room is it located in? That already is like a mystery that was solved like instantly by AI. So really interesting tools to be able to solve something. But yeah, thank you everyone for the insights on building systems. And I love the diversity we had there on everything that you can do and can set up. Cool. I do want to, oh yeah, let's do our poll results real quick. Pop those up. It looks like most people have rent payment and reporting tools, which is awesome and great, especially since this webinar is hosted by Front Lobby. Tenant screening tools. Looks like move-in, move-out checklist was the lease in place system for our audience here today. If you don't already have one, TurboTenant can create a move-in, move-out checklist for you that's tailored to your rental. And then we have a lot of people who haven't gotten started with concrete systems, which is, I'm assuming, why you're here at this webinar. So hopefully this is some awesome insights for you. Cool. We do have a lot of great Q&A, and I do want to move into that soon, but I did want to ask any final thoughts from our speakers on systems or tools that you can put in place tomorrow for the audience. If you have anything to share, I would love to hear it for final thoughts, and then we can move into Q&A.
Yeah, I think a theme that I've heard from everyone, I believe myself, is start off the best you can on the right foot and treat this like a business. And my father-in-law is a Navy captain, and he told me it's a lot easier to loosen up things over time. It's really hard to make things more strict. So start off with the expectation of everything is being operated in the exact way the lease says in the rules of the community. There's no flexibility whatsoever. And it's a lot easier to enforce that than to at month three start to because you've already set the precedent that things are flexible. When in most of these scenarios and these problems that we've all chatted about, they are not flexible. You have to pay rent on time. You have to do the things the right way. Start off on day one that there is no flexibility on the things that there aren't flexibility on. It's really hard to go the opposite way.
Yeah, well said.
Yeah, I agree. Something else I would also add, and what I would recommend, and something that I'm even doing, is go on LinkedIn and start following um, like landlord tenant attorneys, start following some like landlord groups. That way you can kind of keep up with the laws. Because I think going into 2026, we're going to be hit with a lot of surprises, right? Like in LA, you're now required starting next year to have air conditioning in your units, right? So those could be costly mistakes if you don't actually pay attention to what's going on. It's really hard to keep up. So I would say also not only just treat it like a business, but also try to keep up with the laws by just following experts in the field.
Love that. That's a great one. Build your network as much as you can
Hmm.
and go to in-person networking events too. That's huge. We go to a lot of them. And yeah, definitely recommend it.
I'll add one last thing. I also think it's, really essential to stay on top of your records, and specifically I'm meaning financial records. And, reason being is I think a lot of us, when we first get in, we're sort of looking at, well, are we profitable? And we just take the mortgage payment and, or rent minus mortgage payment. Oh, great, we're making money. And you're forgetting all of the additional expenses that you're incurring. So I think it's really essential to be utilizing, a bookkeeping system like TurboTenant that has the automations built in. It makes it easier for tax season as well, of course, but it enables you to be able to be tracking your profit or loss on a consistent basis. And so make decisions based upon that.
That's a great one. We like to say savvy investors always know the score. Yeah,
Yeah,
and bookkeeping is the way to do that.
I like that. Good phrase.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much. This was a really great conversation. We're gonna jump into Q&A, which I'm really excited to get into, and I'm just gonna go ahead and stop sharing. Um, here. Awesome. Cool. My favorite one that came in, and I kind of already asked this one, but I know there's a lot more to this question, is can we elaborate more on using AI with rentals? Whoever wants to take this one.
Well, I mean, I'll start, and I have a feeling everybody probably has a perspective on this. Certainly we at Front Lobby are starting to utilize AI more and more, and so we created a product called Landlord Assist, which you can find for free on the website, to compile the legislation in the different jurisdictions, and so that you can go in, you can ask it a question, you can have a conversation with it, and it's a lot more knowledgeable than, say, something generic like ChatGPT. And we put that on the website to help people start to navigate the difficulties and the complication or complexities of the legislation in their jurisdiction.
Rick, you want to go next?
Sure, why not? So, actually, I do use it in a similar fashion, try to figure out laws. But again, you do have to be very careful, because whenever you use it, always say cite your sources. Because I've looked up laws and it actually gave me sources for a totally different city, a totally different state. So I think there's still some room, but again, it's kind of like what I said earlier: garbage in, garbage out. So you have to be very careful and very specific as to how you want to use AI in your business.
Yeah, I agree. Very specific. You have to be really detailed in how you ask it and then vet things. So we build software, so we're implementing AI into software. And for the longest time, we've always had AI write descriptions and headlines for properties when listing them. It's something that anyone on this call could use ChatGPT to do, and I think you'd find some pretty good examples. And then you ask for three, you pick the one you like or combine them. I think that could help with creativity, and I think that's very specific but very resourceful and not legal. So pretty straightforward there. For us, we're very specific on how we use it to answer questions that we know that landlords are asking through AI and chat. Can it ingest your lease and answer questions about your lease and then cite where you got it from so that you can still vet it? That's the kind of stuff that we'll work on. We already talked about maintenance. And we always want to make sure the sources are there too, so that, hey, based on section 5 of your lease, this says that you can have a pet, your tenant can have a pet or not. And since you're in California, these are the laws for what pet deposits can be and things like that. So that also isn't something that takes weeks. It takes months of vetting and putting in hundreds and thousands of leases to say, does it get it right 99% of the time? If not, what are we missing? It's It's labor intensive, but very specific on how we use it.
If I can mention one last thing. So what's been announced recently was Zillow and ChatGPT are partnering up. It's at more on the listing side. It might also translate to the rental side. So basically what they're doing now is people can go into ChatGPT and say, "Hey, I'm looking for a house. Here's the experience I want." And then they'll actually send you the homes. So what you may want to do, because what's been coming up a lot in the discussion is I can't find quality tenants. So maybe it is kind of what Harrison's saying is like, okay, rewrite my description, knowing that Zillow and ChatGPT are partnering up. Like on my some of my listings that I have right now, I've had to totally rewrite them, knowing that people might be searching that way. So it's like, hey, I'm looking for a rental. Here's my price point, but I want to be walking distance to a coffee shop. So you better put in your description that you're walking distance to a coffee shop.
That's a good one. That's interesting. Also wanted to jump in and add TurboTenant also has AI listing description. So if you click a button, it'll create a title and description for you. And depending on what amenities you put in when you're building your listing, it'll pull those into the description. Things like has a pool, wood floors, if that's something that someone's looking for when they're typing it into ChatGPT. That's interesting. Cool. Thank you guys. I'm going to answer this one really quick. After how many rental units does it make sense to have these services that you offer? I'm going to go ahead and say that you should definitely have systems in place with one rental unit or even be prepared prior to getting that rental unit. But if you guys want to follow up on this one.
Oh, I mean, absolutely one. It's so essential to start from the beginning and put these systems in place. It'll make your life easier. You'll avoid a whole bunch of the mistakes, certainly that I've made, and I think all of us have made over the course of the landlording experience. So yeah, right away.
I mean, one way to look at it is if you are the CEO of your own business, then your sole job at the end of the day is to be a rainmaker and analyze deals. Everything else should be delegated. So if your thought is, hey, I do intend on scaling, then Zach's right. It's like you need to start on your first one, delegate as much as possible so you can go focus on that second one.
Yeah, I'll answer with a story. A friend of mine, she had a rental property in Chicago, and she was living in South Florida, and she had no systems, and wasn't really even tracking the finances that well, and learned that she was actually losing money, a little bit of money each year. And the goal is in 10 years, then she'll sell it, and then she'll make all of her money. And I was like, oh, so this is just a hobby. And that kind of had her come but take back of like, no, this is a business. Like, well, the business should make money the whole time. And you're spending all of your time. Do you love doing this? She's like, no, I hate it. Like, then this is a hobby you don't even like. Do set this up from day one. Set up systems. Make sure that you're running a successful business. You're acting as a CEO, or else it's just a hobby that is hopefully something you enjoy, which I don't think is on the top of most of our attendees list of their favorite thing to do is take maintenance requests and argue about leases.
Awesome. Thank you guys. Yeah, definitely right off the bat, get your systems in place. It'll only get harder if you don't. If you have a drawer full of receipts or a drawer full of lease agreements that are difficult to reference, it'll make your life a little bit more difficult, especially as you start to scale. Really quickly, I'm going to answer this one. How much does TurboTenant cost for each unit, and what does that include? TurboTenant's freemium software. There's a free plan, and you can use almost all tools on it. And then premium is $149 a year for unlimited properties. We do not do per unit pricing. Just want to answer that one real quick. This one's for Zach on front door. Can you recover debt from a tenant that may have stolen someone's identity?
Ooh, interesting question. So in that situation, do you know their new identity or are you only relying on the stolen identity? Because if you don't have their actual identity, then no, it wouldn't be possible to find them. But if they utilize someone's stolen identity to sign the lease and incur the debt, but you've determined that person's real name and date of birth or social security number, then yes, we can.
Awesome. Thank you. This one. This person, where did it go? Someone was asking if any of the speakers have experience in student housing, and if yes, what extra steps do you take um, above and beyond a typical long-term tenant? Anyone have experience in student housing?
Yeah, I do. I mean, typically what I'll ask for is a guarantee from their parents. So often the trouble is with young people, and yeah, I think I shared that story at the beginning for myself, is when you're first going to university, you have no credit. And so you're potentially risky, but you may actually be absolutely responsible. And so you can judge that and then get that guarantee. And that from someone who has established credit and established income.
I was
One,
going to say the same
one,
thing.
yeah, I was going to say that too. And I'll just say one thing that we have with TurboTenant to add to that is when we look at tenants paying rent with credit cards, college towns always index higher than any other area. And it's usually because their parents are paying for it with a credit card. So if you have the ability to accept credit cards as rent payments, that might be something additional. And then you can let the credit card company go and try and fight for payments. So you don't have to.
Hmm.
That's all good advice. Thank you. This is a great question. How often do you do regular property inspections? If you're self-managing out of state, how do you conduct those?
So I'll start. So we do it once a year. And then we have a handyman and we give him a checklist. Because the handyman's like, yeah, sure, it's an easy $150 and they might get work out of it, so they're inclined to do it. But yeah, that's how we do it. So we do it once a year, handyman, give him a detailed checklist of everything to look for.
Rick's answer is way better than mine.
You don't know
I should,
that.
I'm gonna do that now. I'm gonna take your advice.
Yeah, we do it once a year as well, and we have an internal team who of property managers, so they do them, but also have a checklist, and yeah, it inevitably results in a whole bunch of work for additional trades. But it's also, it's very positive because you're monitoring the state of your property, so to determine things like smoke detectors, or are the batteries current or the devices current. And then also, it gives you the opportunity to perhaps do some small improvement that then services your customer who pays you a significant sum of money every year and keep them happy.
You may want to consider that might be a good time just as default, change out the batteries and smoke detectors, change out the air filter. Because even though sometimes you ask the tenant to do it, they don't always do it because they don't really care. Um, so that might just be part of it as well. Say, hey, look, it's for the tenants. Like, hey, look, we're doing a maintenance check. We want to make sure that everything's working well for you. If there's anything that you may have noticed, whatever, just let us know. So turn it into a positive for them.
Those are great answers. Thank you. I am going to move into our last question here in a second. But quickly, just wanted to remind everyone that you will be receiving an email after this webinar with the recording, plus some resources, and then how to reach all of the speakers here today. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining, and thank you all to our speakers. This has been a really awesome discussion, no matter where you're at in your landlord journey. But yeah, I just want to jump into this last question. Right as my cat decided to join me. This is Lily. It says she is a first-time landlord. Went with a year-long lease, but hearing that could have done or should have done month to month. How does this group feel about month to month versus a year with a single family rental?
I'll start. The first question is, where's the property?
It's in LA.
Okay, then that actually helps. So, um, the challenge with Los Angeles is that it's very, very tenant friendly. So, in theory, even if they have a year-long lease, if they want to break the lease, it's going to probably cost you more to battle it out than let them go. So typically, what I see is people will do the 1 year lease, and then from there, just say, yeah, we just let it go month to month. And that's what I've done typically, is just because, again, it's going to be expensive to fight it. And if they say, hey, I'm moving, then what are you going to do? They're going to stop paying rent, and again, you have a battle on your hands. Um, what I would do is probably have a conversation with them. So maybe it's like, hey, look, if you want to stay month to month, that's fine, but I need 60-day notice. Because one of the big challenges would be if, let's say, here we are in October, oh, I'm moving out, but now we're going into the holidays and it's gonna be hard to get it rented. So I would probably just have that conversation and say, okay, fine, you can be month to month, but I need so much notice if you're gonna bounce.
Great response.
Yeah,
And
I think location is the first question that came up. And like if it's in a location that there's a lot of demand, we work with a lot of people that do midterm rentals, which fall in that 1 to kind of 6 month range. And if there's the right location, typically they work with a lot of traveling nurses. So is it close to a hospital? Is it close to a university? The location is really valuable in that sense. If you are going to go the midterm route, to plug in partnerish competitor, a furnished finder is a really good site to find, but you might want to furnish it then. So I think that's the big thing. What do you want? You can charge a bit more if you're in the right location, but then you also have to have even more systems in place to turn over a unit quickly. You need the cleaning crews. You need, a really good set of vendors to work with and have a regular checklist for turnover. But I mean, the people we work with that do this, they swear by it because you can make more. But there's also a lot more involvement in these types of investments. So for the right location, it could be a really good investment, but it's also a different kind of investment then.
Yeah, and just to cap it off, I mean, it's so heavily dependent upon the jurisdiction and the type of property and what the landlord's goals are with that particular unit. I mean, for me, I prefer 1 year leases because I like the security of it and I like knowing that that commitment has been made, notwithstanding Rick's very valid comment that they may just be able to get out of it anyway, but at least you have some assurity, and of course you can be reporting that on the basis to the credit bureaus to ensure that it is paid for the term defined by their commitment. But yeah, very very dependent upon what you want to accomplish with the particular property.
absolutely. Those are great responses. And yeah, definitely you can use AI too to do some research about your market to see what type of leases are popular in the area. But yeah, that was a really great question. And thank you, everyone. Cool. So we are wrapping up. Check your emails for resources in the recording after this call. You can also see some links to Front Lobby and TurboTenant in the chat. You can reach out to all these speakers on LinkedIn as well. Hope they don't mind that I'm saying that, but thank you so much, Harrison, Rick, and Zach, for all of your expert insights. And thank you, Front Lobby, for hosting us. This has been a really great webinar, and I hope everyone has a good Halloween. Happy Halloween.
Thank you,
Thank
everybody.
you.
Halloween.
All right,
Appreciate it.
bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.